Nico Collins just went on IR, and we have a ton of bye weeks during week 6. So let's hop into these rankings for wide receivers and running backs. Starting off with the wide receivers, we're going to have tier 1 consist of CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, whatever order you want to put them in, I really can understand. I think this is what we all thought coming into the year. And CeeDee Lamb's looked like a stud. Jamar Chase has obviously been fantastic as of late. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, you cannot go wrong with his insanely high floor. I think all three have pretty solid matchups, and you just have to start all these guys, obviously. There's really no point in arguing about the semantics of it. But in tier 2, I only have two players, Malik Nabers at 4 and Drake London at 5. I just think that tier 2 versus tier 3 is a big difference, and I feel very good about starting Malik Nabers. Even off the concussion, he's just truly an elite talent at this point, and you have to start him because even against the Browns, against a tough defense, he's playing the Bears this week, but we've seen that he can put up fantastic performances no matter what because he can truly transcend talent, transcend situation. Daniel Jones has looked solid. It is going to be a little tougher against the Bears, but again, Nabers is that guy, and you really can't rank a guy that can score 20 points on a weekly basis much lower than this. Now, Drake London, we saw the targets improving every single week, and Kirk Cousins finally looks like himself. So that's really all that you need to see. Kirk Cousins can support fantasy options. Drake London's an elite player. The match made in heaven is finally sparked, and London had 33 points last week. Now he plays the Panthers. I don't see how you can put him outside of the top 5 this week when there's a ton of other players on buys. And in tier 3, you're going to have Marvin Harrison at 6, Mike Evans at 7, Garrett Wilson at 8, Jaden Reed at 9, Chris Godwin at 10, Deebo Samuel at 11, DJ Moore at 12, and Brandon Ayuk at 13. Marvin Harrison Jr. has looked more of a rookie than Malik Nabers, but he still has looked very impressive as of late. There's a reason he's 6. Kyler Murray just hasn't thrown for more than 1 touchdown since that big week 2 performance, so it is a little worrisome with Murray in the offense. Obviously, Marv, being the big body receiver he is going to rely on touchdowns, so that's a little concerning to see that from Murray, but I still really like the talent of Marv and Murray, and it's a solid matchup against the Packers, so I'm putting him at 6. Then you have Mike Evans, who is going up against the Saints, and Marshawn Lattimore. However, matchup-based statistics aren't as important anymore because, yes, obviously he's going to struggle against a guy like Lattimore, but even as an X receiver, NFL teams just move around their best receivers a lot more than ever before. So he's not going to be playing against Lattimore for 100% of the game. And Evans is a guy that in 2 or 3 plays could get you to 20 points with that touchdown upside and big play production that he has. So I still feel more confident about him than Garrett Wilson and that mess with the Jets. Even though he just did have 22 targets, he had a great game, but he still only caught about half those passes. So it makes me feel a little bit better about Wilson, of course. He's a top 10 guy when we were really worried about him before. But the offense as a whole is still a little worrisome. Jaden Reed has been fantastic, averaging about 15 points per game with Jordan Love. Love should be a little healthier now in week 6, so I have to put him there. Chris Godwin had a hot start to the year, but he hasn't looked as good recently. Still a high floor of about at least over 10 points, so we're putting him in tier 3 as well because he is also, if Mike Evans does take away attention from Lattimore, he should be the primary benefactor. Deebo Samuel did have a tough week 5, scoring 3 points, but keep in mind the week before he was doubtful to even play, so this is really his first true game back from injury. I expect him to get better as the season goes on, and I think that he should thrive as the elite talent that he is. DJ Moore has looked a lot better as well. Caleb Williams, my guy, has looked a world better as each week passes by. Keenan Allen doesn't look the same as he once did. Sadly, he's not really too big of a factor, and DJ Moore is clearly the guy right now. Rome Odunze obviously still needs some time to get implemented, so playing alongside Caleb, he's throwing for 300 yards, and you're connecting him with a very talented receiver and more. I think definitely warrants him being in this tier 3. Brandon Ayuk has a nice bounce back. Obviously, the talent he is, I think you have to put him there, but I would still rather have Deebo over him just in a nutshell. Both playing against the Seahawks, solid matchup as well. Now, tier 4, we're going to drop down to our wide receiver 14 and A.J. Brown. 15 is going to be DK Metcalf. 16 is Devonta Smith. 17 is Stephon Diggs. And 18 is going to be Chris Olave. A.J. Brown's a guy I would have much higher than this if this wasn't his first game back, but the hamstring injury. DK Metcalf is just a fantastic player. He's looked very good as of late. Sometimes he'll be much more effective for the Seahawks than fantasy because he is the X receiver and he's not on the level of Mike Evans in terms of scoring fantasy points. But he still looked very good recently, so I think you have to put him as a high-end wide receiver too. Then Devonta Smith. He's coming off a concussion. It's his only concussion of his career, and they gave him some time to rest. So I think he comes in a lot healthier than A.J. Brown. And even when Brown was playing, he had 15 points. Without Brown, he had 20 points. So regardless, I think that's going to be a huge, huge help for Jalen Hurts. And Smith is just a good wide receiver to play in general. Stephon Diggs, I honestly could have Diggs even higher than this because there is going to be no Nico Collins. So again, that's why he's in this tier. But I think Tank is just going to be the biggest benefactor. I don't actually have him ranked in my top 24, but he's definitely hovering around that wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 2 range now. Diggs look very good. Again, no Nico helps him a ton, but you still have Tank there, so it's not like he's going to get 100% of the targets. And then you have Chris Olave at 18. Been very disappointing. He only had, I believe, 1 target last week for 4 yards. Now no Derek Carr, which obviously is going to kill them. And I've learned my mistake putting Jalen Waddle too high, but I'm going to have to put Olave here just because of the sheer talent he is and the hope that they start Spencer Rattler. And he looked very good in the preseason. I think Rattler, honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if he was good enough to support Olave this week. We are going to drop down a tier, though, to tier 5. We're going to have JSN at 19, Deontay Johnson at 20, 21 is going to be T. Higgins, Amari Cooper at 23, and Brian Thomas Jr. at Amari Cooper at 22, Brian Thomas Jr. at 23, and then our mini tier is going to be 24 of Terry McLaurin. I really like JSN still. DK Metcalf has the ability to open up the field for JSN every single week. Solid week last week, 13 points. I think he's sitting in that wide receiver 2 range, low end wide receiver 2 range right now, but the targets are there. He's clearly playing over Tyler Lockett, which always gives him the upside to have a massive game. Deontay Johnson just is getting a ton of targets. Playing against the Cardinals, I think the Panthers offense, as long as they look serviceable, you have to start a guy like Deontay, especially because he's just shown that he can produce versus some of these other guys that are dealing with, rough weeks in the past. Then you have T. Higgins coming on strong from that injury. Obviously, he's a fantastic talent playing the Giants, so expect a massive week from him. Amari Cooper at 22. He's been getting open. Deshaun Watson just struggles to get him the football, so I don't see how you can have him lower than this because he's been winning. He's been solid. He's had those good weeks. It's just the consistency of why he's not higher. Brian Thomas Jr. has looked very good. He's one of the best rookie wide receivers in football. Obviously, you have Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr., but if neither of those guys were in the league, he'd be getting talked about a lot more. So he's having a fantastic season to date. Playing the Bears is a tough matchup, but overall, I don't see how you can really bench him after what he's done recently. Then Terry McLaurin, again, very good player. Going up against the Ravens, so it is a little scary with that defense with Jaden Daniels. It may force him to, I just feel that it's going to force him to run the ball a little bit more and not air it out to Terry McLaurin. They're not going to be able to pass the ball as heavily. I think it could be a very high-scoring game, but at the same time, I think that it could also be a slow, methodical game where Daniels is trying to pick up a ton of first down with his legs, and they are going to rely on the run a lot more. But before we dive into the running backs, if you guys want any personalized advice, if you have any questions about who you should start after this, or even in these rankings, you have any players that you're comparing, any team advice as a whole, just join our FTR Discord. It's going to be a huge help to us and you. It'll be in the description, in the comments. It's completely free. And let's dive right into our running back rankings. Starting out in Tier 1, we're going to have Saquon Barkley as our RB1 for the week, Alvin Kamara at 2, and Derrick Henry at 3. Again, these are the only 3 players that I project out as having a solidified massive game. Saquon obviously has been a stud. Alvin Kamara has been great, and Derrick Henry has just been getting better as the season goes on, so you have to put those guys up there. In tier 2, we have Kenneth Walker at 4, Jordan Mason at 5, and Jahmyr Gibbs at 6. Again, Walker is playing the 49ers. It's a tough matchup. He didn't have the best week, but he's shown that he does have a very high floor at this point, and his ceiling is obviously massive, one of the most talented runners in the league. Then you have Jordan Mason, fantastic player, going up against the Seahawks, so solid matchup. It's just a little bit of a question of the talent where you can't really project him out to be that Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley every single week. Jahmyr Gibbs, good matchup as well, going up against the Cowboys, and you feel very good about his upside due to the pass catching ability. Then at 7, we're going to have Josh Jacobs, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, and so Jacobs is 7, Bijan is 8, Hall is 9, Jonathan Taylor is 10, Joe Mixon at 11, James Cook at 12, James Conner at 13, David Montgomery at 14, and Chuba Hubbard at 15. Yeah, that's a massive tier. I think this week is extremely tough for running backs, but really the only thing that I want to touch on in this tier, obviously if Jacobs with Love back, he's looked a lot better, and I expect that to continue for the rest of the season. Then you have JT coming off injury, tough matchup, otherwise he would be a little higher. Joe Mixon, Cook, Connor, Montgomery are all kind of fine. They're solid options. You can move them up, move them down. Good players, solid matchup. Chuba Hubbard as well, as long as Jonathan Brooks is not playing, he's going to be ranked this high because the offense looks much better, and he's just produced week in and week out. But I want to touch on Bijan and Breece Hall. I don't know if this is really too much of an overreaction. I don't know if this is going to be much lower than the consensus. But at this point with them, even though it's a good matchup, even though things look good, they're players that I have to see it first before I rank them as an elite running back 1. They're still being ranked, as a mid RB1 at 8 and 9, but Bijan, the Falcons score a ton of points, and he doesn't explode. It seems like sometimes you can make excuses, sometimes you can explain why a player hasn't produced, but at the end of the day, fantasy points speak volume. What players actually put out and proven production has to be taken into account, and Bijan and Breece have simply not produced the number of fantasy points that they projected to, regardless of the situation. And with Bijan, I feel a little better about because you don't really have Tyler Allgeier's not very good. The Falcons' offense looks a lot better, but Breece, they just fired Robert Saleh. The offense is a mess, and Braylon Allen's not a bad running back at the moment, according to the Jets. I personally don't think he's that talented, but he's like pretty solid, and the Jets think he's good enough to take away touches. So I just can't rank him higher than some of these guys until we see him actually produce. Now, that said, they still have to be in this tier because we know the talents they are. We know what we thought of them coming into the year, and we know how good they could be. But right now, a lot of that is more projection than actually production. So we'll drop down in tier 4 with that in mind. And at 16, we are going to have J.K. Dobbins. At 17, we're going to have Brian Robinson. At 18, we're going to have Tony Pollard. Dobbins, not a great match against the Broncos, actually. Their D-line has been pretty solid against running backs. But we saw how good he looked early in the year. 20 points back-to-back in week 1 and 2. Then, the last few weeks, 8, 9 points. So, it's honestly not the worst floor. I just don't see how you can rank a guy that has a ceiling of over 20 points and a floor of still a solid 8 to 9 points, lower than a mid RB2, especially in a game where they're projected to be winning. They have a spread of -3. So in that situation, they're going to be throwing checkdowns to J.K. Dobbins, giving him the rock a ton. Exactly the situation that he needs to succeed. I think that Dobbins just is a fantastic play, especially with the upside he has as, your RB2. Then Brian Robinson just is a great back that has just simply produced. Tony Pollard has been kind of hit or miss this year, but fantastic match against the Colts. The defense there looks terrible, and they've allowed basically every single running back to look great. Then we're going to drop down to tier 5, where we have DeAndre Swift at 19, Najee Harris at 20, Ramondre Stevenson at 21, and Travis Etienne at 22. DeAndre Swift, as a Bears fan, has looked much better in the last few weeks than obviously early in the year, but he still hasn't been a fantastic runner. It's not like he's catching passes at an absurd rate either. It's been a lot of touchdowns for Swift, which I'll be honest, the Bears offense is good, but I don't know if that's necessarily sustainable for a guy like Swift. When you also have Roschon Johnson coming in and vulturing some of those touchdowns. Najee Harris, he kind of is what he is. He's here because he gets volumes. Ramondre Stevenson is a guy that looked really good, but we've also seen that when the Patriots are behind and when it's not a good game script, he can score basically 0 points. And they're playing the Texans this week. Even without Nico Collins, they should pretty much boat race the Patriots. They have Drake May. Not really sure if that's going to make too much of a difference in his first ever NFL start. So, Stevenson, he does have upside, which is why I'm still starting him. But at the same time, you have to take the risk that he could put up about 3 points this week because the Texans are going to be so much better than the Patriots, and it's not even going to be close where they can't really give the ball to Stevenson. ETN has just been on a downward spiral. Tank Bigsby has been trending up, but he's still getting volume, which is enough to put him as an RB2 at this point in the year. We'll drop down to our last 2 players, and that's going to be Zach Moss at 23, Rico Dowdle at 24. I don't love either of these plays, but Moss going against the Giants, I think, has solid touchdown upside, and I like him more around the goal line and red zone than Chase Brown. 2 are going to be very close, though. I don't have Brown much lower than this. Then Rico Dowdle has been very good. He's looked like the clear Cowboys starter. The coach speak for him has been through the charts, but he is playing against the Lions, which they've allowed the least points to running backs so far this year. Obviously very concerning. That said, he's coming off a 19-point game. The Cowboys are still a very good offense, and you have Rico attached to them. That's going to wrap up the video, though. I hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments or shoot me a DM on Discord. I will answer both of those, but Discord is probably the best place to reach me on a consistent basis if you want to go back and forth. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, as always, and I'll see you guys in the next one.